I'm Kirk, and I'm the project coordinator for the Participatory Plant Breeding Project. I'm standing in the field at Carman today in front of a yield trial that includes plots from farmer-selected populations and also typically grown cultivars in the area. So the Participatory Plant Breeding Project starts off with a breeder making a cross, typically with input from the farmers that are participating in the project. I increase seed, and then we give the F2 or the F3, so the second or third generation seed, to a farmer to grow and select on their own farm for 3 years. So the project that I'm standing in front of includes populations that were grown and selected on farms in Manitoba for the past 3 years. So in 2011, 2012, and 2013, this group of farmers grew and selected these populations for their own farms. So in this year of the project, I have some of those populations grown in a common garden here at Carman, and we have them planted in a replicated trial so that I can compare the populations that farmers have selected against each other and also against Czech cultivars. So you can see in the trial, we have some white signs that indicate the Czech cultivars. These are used for comparison purposes. So it's nice to be able to compare the farmer-selected populations to some of the cultivars that they may choose to grow on their own farms for things like early season vigor, so how fast they shoot up out of the ground, ground cover, how fast they cover the rows, things like plant diseases, fusarium, maturities, yield, and quality characteristics. So this is the first time that we've actually been able to compare the farmer-selected populations in a common experiment such as this, and next year we'll have more seed available, so we'll be able to compare these and grow them at more locations across the prairies. So let's take a look and see some of the differences between the farmer-selected populations with the Czechs. So first, before we do that, I'm just going to point out this cultivar that was recommended for registration, BW487. And this is a wheat that was grown and selected under organic management from the collaboration between Stephen Fox at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and Martin Entz at the University of Manitoba. So the organic breeding program started approximately 11 years ago, and this is the first cultivar that was recommended for registration out of that program. And the purpose of both the organic and the participatory breeding programs is to make selections under an organic environment, just because we're thinking that by growing and selecting wheat or oats under organic growing conditions, we'll be able to have varieties or populations that are more tailored to organic farmers. And the weed populations that they might encounter on their farms, the soil fertility, and also the disease pressure. So you can see here we have fairly small plots, so they're about 3 meters long by 0.6 meters wide, so they're 4 rows wide, where we grow these in a yield trial. Because we're working with small amounts of seed, this is the plot size that we're dealing with at this time, but it is replicated 4 times. So we'll just take a walk to the second row, where we have some farmer-selected populations that have the same parents. So they have had common parents, and then 2 different farmers grew and selected them over a period of 3 years. And we can see some differences between the populations that were selected on one farm or another after this 3-year period. And it's really exciting to see that the selection environment matters, and also the personal criteria of the farmer that's selecting them matters as well. So we can see some differences in the height, the leaf sizes, the disease resistance between the same population grown and selected in 2 different locations. So the first one here, just because these are, it's a randomized experiment, we have a couple of spots where 2 plots are beside each other that are actually the same population. So you can see these 2 plots here are actually the same population, so they have the same parents. And this one here was grown and selected near Pilot Mound, and this one here was grown and selected near Melita, Manitoba. And they actually do look quite similar. This one perhaps looks like it's going to be lodging a bit more. So you can see that the wheat is kind of bending, and I'll be doing lodging measurements in all of these plots later on in the growing season. But in terms of leaf diseases, they're quite similar. They're quite similar heights, and the leaf sizes are about the same. And we'll just move on a bit to the next example. So this is a different population. And this population here was grown and selected by the same farmer in Melita as one of the ones we last looked at. So you can see it's on the shorter end of the wheat plots that we have here, compared to this population that was grown and selected actually at Carman. And you can see it's probably about 10 centimeters taller than the one that was selected at Melita. And that's really just the farmer preference. The person making those selections, obviously here they were more interested in selecting for taller wheat. And also we have larger leaf sizes. So it's really interesting to compare the different leaf sizes between populations of wheat. Sometimes we end up with quite large wide leaves, either the farmer selecting for plants like that, or those were just the ones that were the most competitive. So it is thought that the wider the leaves are, the more competitive the plants will actually be. So let's take a look here. This is from a leaf from a farmer-selected population compared to a flag leaf of carberry, which is a registered wheat variety. And you can see that the actual width of the flag leaves is quite different. And this is something else that I'll be doing measurements on this week, measuring the width of the flag leaves, because it is thought that having larger flag leaves is one of the things that would contribute to increased weed tolerance or weed suppression in a wheat variety. So throughout the growing season, I have made some measurements. As I mentioned, early season vigor is something that I have measured, and also leaf diseases. I don't have a lot of leaf disease in the field right now, so I have looked to see if there are differences between populations in terms of things like tan spot and septoria. Right now we don't have very high disease pressure, but later on in the growing season I'll be measuring disease pressure again to see if there are differences. I'll also be looking at fusarium and rust for diseases, as well as things like plant height, lodging, yield, and quality characteristics. And we're also planning on doing some baking tests this year so that we can see how suitable these varieties would be for baking, because they would be are targeted as Canadian Western Red Spring wheat. So later on in the year we'll have results from this trial, and it'll be exciting to see how these populations